Hello and welcome to Investflow. Today we'll be looking at Airbnb, the company that's looking to disrupt hotels and the experience industry. So let's get right to it. Airbnb, ticker symbol ABNB, currently has a market cap of around 97 billion US dollars. They employ around 6,000 employees and were founded in 2008. They are headquartered in San Francisco and are in the traveling sector. They were founded and are currently led by CEO Brian Chesky. Airbnb just recently went public in November of 2020, and as we can see, the stock really hasn't gone anywhere so far. They started off with a nice 50% increase, then came crashing down again to around the break even, or even into the negative, I think. And then they went on to once again go to around plus 50%, and then with the whole growth correction came down again. So currently they are trading 15% above the IPO price. In the ownership structure, we can see that the founder and current CEO Brian Chesky holds around 3.9% of the shares outstanding. I always like to invest in companies that are owner operated because then the CEO has a big incentive to look out for the company and have a good performance for the stock price too. Always important to look at the incentives. Take a look at the analyst ratings. We can see that analysts are pretty torn. Half of them roughly are rating it as a buy and half of them have them as a hold, but there are also some seller recommendations. The lowest price target is $102, which is a downside potential of 42%, and the highest price target is around $250, which also is a upside potential of 43%. So let's take a look at the business model for Airbnb. Airbnb is a platform where people can book something like hotels pretty much. So normal people or companies can rent out their flats or just some location, and people can directly live there instead of going into a hotel. Currently there are around 4 million hosts listed on the platform. 5.6 million listings are in a total of over 100,000 cities and in over 200,000 regions worldwide. As we also can see, the demographic is pretty diversified. So around 36% of customers are between 25 and 34. But we also have customers in all the other segments. Even the 65 plus segment has 5% of the customers. So all different age segments are looks like they are getting along with the concept of Airbnb. The obvious question now is, of course, why choose an Airbnb over a hotel? At hotels you get extra services like people that clean after you and oftentimes breakfast. So why choose an Airbnb, just some probably random location, over a hotel? In many US markets, Airbnbs can be between 6 and 17% cheaper than hotels. In Europe, Airbnb is between 8 and 70% cheaper. So the cost is also a factor why people choose Airbnb over hotels. There are also 400,000 companies who work directly with Airbnb to manage employee travels. So of course companies always love a discount, and especially if they use it for all of their employees. These 8 to 17% discounts really add up. Airbnb for Work also offers relocation services, team building exercises, and off-site locations for meetings. So it is just the staying part, but also the experience part, which often is included in Airbnb services. As we can see in the graphic below, in the United States there are currently over 600,000 listings, in France over 400,000, in Italy over 300,000, in Spain over 200,000, and over 100,000 in the UK. So there are a lot of different listings you can choose from. So pretty much for everybody there will be the right place to stay at. I already mentioned it, but the experience part is getting more and more important for Airbnb. Especially during the pandemic, when people were forced to be stuck at home, they actually managed to implement experiences which are online. So for example, some concert that was live streamed or things like that, where you could purchase tickets on the Airbnb platform. So this is especially interesting because it has some great synergy effects also, like we saw with the Airbnb for work offering. You can combine the hotel part with experience part to make the whole holiday experience a lot better. Airbnb has done a lot of innovation in the recent time. For example, in May of 2021, they introduced I'm Flexible, an entirely new way to search an Airbnb, where guests are flexible about where or when they travel. In November of 2021, they expanded I'm Flexible with a date range of up to 12 months and nearly 30 categories of unique states. Guests have used I'm Flexible nearly 800 million times. So instead of making people choose exact dates and things like that, you can now just use flexible searches to just say, I want to do a holiday somewhere in that time, and that way find some interesting things you maybe wouldn't have found otherwise. As cross-border travel recovers, Airbnb wanted to improve translations, so they developed the translation engine, a new technology that automatically translates descriptions and reviews of listings. This is especially interesting in my opinion because they have such a big and diverse network of different listings all over the world. As we saw earlier, there are like I think 200,000 listings in Spain, for example. And if you have a global network, then people will come into contact with cultures and languages they don't understand. So you need a good translation engine so that people have a larger variety of listings to consider. Other new offerings include features like accessibility ratings to make Airbnb accommodations more accessible to the disabled community, a verified Wi-Fi service that informs guests of a listing's Wi-Fi speed before they make a booking. This is also very important because especially if you are disabled in some sort of way, you want to know what you're getting into. Because the worst thing that I could possibly imagine is booking a holiday and then realizing that you can't actually live in the place you want to stay at. And also, of course, in our modern world, Wi-Fi speeds are very important. And I think everybody had this experience of staying at a hotel or some resort where the Wi-Fi was just terrible. Airbnb also launched AirCover, which is a part of the Airbnb winter release in November of 2021. It is a top-to-bottom protection, free for every Airbnb host. And AirCover includes a $1 million liability insurance and a $1 million damage protection with new coverage for pet damages, deep cleaning and more. Early host reception to AirCover has been overwhelmingly positive. This is also pretty interesting that they are integrating insurance services now into their offering, and especially with such a high ceiling of $1 million just for the free version that everybody gets. They are really looking to keep people in the system and make them not want to switch away from Airbnb. Could also be interesting to see if they maybe can expand this in the future, but given that it's already at 1 million liability, I don't really see many clients that would need a higher protection than that. For the future, Airbnb decided on 3 different key priorities where they want to accelerate their pace of innovation and focus on. These are live anywhere on Airbnb, Airbnb becomes the ultimate host, and tap into the new generation of hosts. On Live Anywhere on Airbnb, they basically want to enable people to spend longer times in Airbnb locations. They are talking about weeks, months, or even entire seasons where people can stay in Airbnbs. So what they're planning is basically to make people accustomed to just living in different places all the time via rented Airbnbs. So that's very interesting. The Airbnb becomes the ultimate host part is talking about making the experience even better by making more personalized services and basically being the best host in the world because of that, because they will be by far the biggest collection of data for services like that. They're also looking to be a better place for hosts to be, which we also can see in the AirCover service I covered previously. And basically, with 4 million different hosts on Airbnb, they think they just scratched the surface. So they are surveying thousands of people to find out why they maybe what kind of obstacles hinders them from starting with Airbnb, what kind of myths are out there about maybe like people not paying or something like that, and general misconceptions. If we take a look at the market position, we can see that they basically share the market with two competitors. This is for one's Expedia and for one Booking. We can also see though that the different segments are not really overlapping much. So we have a 5% overlap with the services Booking.com is offering, a 6% overlap with the services Expedia is offering, and a 3% overlap where they are competing with both Expedia and Booking. So we can see in this huge diversified market there is a lot of space, and Airbnb is managing to capture a niche pretty much for themselves right now. The total addressable market for 2021 was estimated by around 1.2 trillion for short-term stays like vacations, $60 billion for long-term stays, and $240 billion for experiences. The future total addressable market is estimated to be around 1.8 trillion for short-term stays, 210 billion for long-term stays, and experiences are expected to grow a lot to 1.4 trillion. So the market is absolutely huge that Airbnb is operating in. A very important metric to take a look at for Airbnb is the GBV. This stands for gross booking value per night and experience booked. So basically, if a person stays at an Airbnb or has an Airbnb experience, the amount of money they will roughly spend on average on that day. So as we can see, the GBV increased a lot in the last 2 years and went from around 122 to around 153, peaking at 161 in Q2 of 2021. Since this is the vacation business, we can expect some seasonality, so it will be interesting to observe this going forward if they can keep increasing this value and add services on top for people to spend more money. Airbnb also faced some issues in 2019 when Airbnb got heavily regulated. In some parts of the world they got straight up banned, so people weren't allowed to rent out their places and at Airbnb anymore. In other places they were restricted to only being allowed to rent out, for example, 150 days a year in Paris. And in other places they only were allowed to rent out certain properties. For example, hosts may only rent out their primary residences where they live for more than 6 months out of the year in Los Angeles. So restrictions are a big issue for Airbnb, and this will especially be important going forward as the platform scales even more and becomes even more relevant. Before I continue with the fundamentals of the company, I would kindly ask you to thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel. I would also encourage you to leave some comments down below about whether or not you like the video and what you think about the company. And also feel free to follow me on Twitter at StonkMetal. If we take a look at the last full year numbers, we can see that revenues increased a lot from 2019 to 2020 by around 77% to almost 6 billion. The net income made huge steps into the direction of profitability, from minus 4.5 billion all the way to only a net loss of minus 350 million. The EBIT even was profitable with around 480 30 million in profit. The equity increased by 60% to 4.7 billion, and with that the equity ratio increased to 34%. The shares outstanding sadly also increased though by 5% to 526 million. Shares outstanding always is a negative if they go up because the operating profits the company generates have to be split up onto more shares outstanding. Looking at the valuation, we can see that Airbnb isn't cheap. The forward price to earnings ratio is around 140. The price to sales is 16. The price to book value is 20. Price to cash flow is 49. There is no PEG ratio you can calculate since they haven't been GAAP profitable in the past. And the Petrovsky F-score is pretty decent, pretty good actually, at 7 out of 9. We take a look at the last 5 years, we can see that revenues increased nicely by around 130% over the last 5 years. The net loss has pretty much stayed around the break even for most of the last 5 years, with the exception of 2020, where of course the COVID pandemic really hit the company hard. A business that pretty much depends on people making vacations really is screwed if people are forced to be locked down, so yeah. Fortunately, they managed to launch the experience feature and include digital experiences in there, so that made this situation a lot better, otherwise it would have been an even bigger net loss. The free cash flow, on the other hand, is positive and has increased around 1,300% over the last 5 years, and especially the comparison between 2020 and 2021 is gigantic. From minus 660 million in free cash flow, they went to a free cash flow of over 2 billion. In the debt department, we can see that Airbnb has a net liquidity of $6.3 billion in cash, which is pretty good. That's around a 6 to 7% of the market cap in cash. The debt to equity ratio is 185. That comes from around 9 billion in liabilities and around 5 billion in equities. This is right around our upper end of the guideline of 200%. So this has to be monitored going into the future, but right now it's in the green, it's okay. In the guidance we can see that they are expected to keep growing revenues sharply. The 2023 revenues are expected to almost touch the 10 billion mark. The operating margin and the net margin are expected to grow into the positive and grow to around 17 or 14% respectively. So analysts are expecting the company to also become net profitable in this year actually already. So let's take a look at my summary of Airbnb. They have a very strong market position with not much overlap to their competitors. They have a huge network with 4 million hosts in 200,000 different regions of the world. They have strong organic growth and a good future outlook. On the other hand, they have a high valuation and a lot of political risks with regulations in different parts of the world. Looking at the moat, we don't really see a lot of technological moat here. This could improve in the future though if they can increase the personalization on the platform with the data they harvest. On the brand level, they are the second best, since Airbnb is pretty much the name you think of if you think about international travel that's not in a hotel. And on the network side, they are obviously the highest level of moat. They just have the largest network with over 4 million hosts and over 5.6 million listings. My outlook for Airbnb is that they have pricing power through their market position. They have the first movers advantage, since they basically created this whole space. They have a huge total addressable market with trillion-dollar TAMs in the different segments. They are expected to become profitable on a GAAP basis this fiscal year. They had growth dampeners in the past due to political decisions, and this can be a major problem in the future too. The travel market is very competitive, but then again, most competitors have a slightly different niche. They also have huge margins with around a 80% gross margin. So with a marketplace model like this could mean income margins of like 25 to 30% in the future. So in summary, I think there is a good upside potential in the company, and I will put it on my personal watch list and keep an eye out on it. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, consider liking and subscribing again. Leave a comment down below, and see you next time.